How did you get from working for Norman Brinker to co-founding Outback Steakhouse?
You know, it sounds like a big jump, but my first steak and ale position was as a trainee in Rockville, Maryland. Just so happened in Rockville, Maryland, in 1974, I met a guy named Chris Sullivan. Chris Sullivan was going to become my partner at Outback Steakhouse. So we formed a friendship back then in 1973. We stayed in touch. I was transferred to New Orleans, and in New Orleans is when the whole idea of flavor, the explosion of flavor. I watched it happen with Paul Prudhomme in 1984 with blackened redfish. Blackened redfish was one of the most exciting entrees that hit the marketplace, and I watched it very closely. Cooking fish at 550 degrees with 17 different spices, and what a hit that was.
So you really built an incredible reputation with the blooming onion.
Right.
Tell that story, because it's really exciting.
You know, as I watched in 1984, you know, the explosion of flavor. One night, George Beal, who was my supervisor at Steak and Ale, he and I both went to a restaurant in New Orleans called LaRousse Restaurant. And Warren was a 5-star Michelin guide. And I watched that food at this, you know, Warren's food was incredible. He really could go against any of the French chefs. Paul Bocuse, when he came to America, Warren was the chef picked out to challenge Paul Bocuse. So when we were at Warren's restaurant, I looked at that food and tasted the flavors. They were so extraordinary. And I said, this belongs in casual dining at modest prices. So that was the seed to become Outback Steakhouse. Then the bloomin' onion was the embodiment of flavor, all in one appetizer with $4. We sold it at $4, and it was shareable. It could be shared by 6 people, which meant it was about 70 cents a piece.
Now, if someone hasn't actually seen the blooming onion, I mean, it looks almost like a flower.
Yes, the idea of the bloomin' onion,
by hand.
Yes, the idea came out of a Japanese cookbook. There was a chef that I worked with in New Orleans, Dave Glowski, and he and I looked at this from, you know, inside a cookbook from Japan. And Japan has all the ways of making vegetables look beautiful, symmetrical. And that's where the idea of the symmetry and the beauty of the bloomin' onion is to make an appetizer instead of onion rings that are just scattered on a plate, is to make a flower out of these onions. Then the idea was how to bring in the flavors of all of the seasonings of New Orleans. And there's 17 different spices in the onion. And then there's 37 different ingredients in the sauce. We cut each one by hand. And I used to train it 1 thumbnail down with a 4-inch paring knife, 1 thumbnail across. And we used to all cut them by hand. Now we have a machine that helps us guide us through that, because some would look a little like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, some to the left, some to the right, but we got that fixed with the machine I call Gloria. Gloria is from my altar board days of thanks be to God that we don't have to cut these by hand anymore.
Well, one of the things which you've always been terrific at is the customer experience. And as you said, making food look beautiful, and you did that with the blooming onion. You know, having the insight to adapt what was being done by a few other great chefs with seasonings and how you really make the preparation special. Those are things that became kind of the foundation of the experience at Outback, isn't that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So what else in the Outback experience was important? What about training the employees?
Well, you know, at Outback, we did, I think, 2 things that separated us immediately from all other competition. One, as prior managers in restaurants, we knew that the general manager was a undervalued person. So we said, let's raise the prestige of the general manager into a proprietor. And we asked those proprietors to invest $25,000, write a check. They wrote a big check to become a proprietor, and then they got 10% of the cash flow. And that could make them a millionaire if everything went right, if they, after 20 years, they got the equity from that and stock options. It really could be a great investment. But I think that one thing was part of it. Then the other part is that we created what was called the three-table station. If you've ever been in a restaurant and you can't get the attention of your waitress, you'll find out that normally their station is either too big or they have too many tables. So we mandated our restaurants have a three-table station, which is a waitress has only 3 tables to worry about. Service standards are always going to be there when you have that sort of tightly defined service area. So those were 2 of the things, and then we had sequence times, ticket times for everything we did. We had, in the kitchen, we had timers on all of our food so that we knew that each dish was going to come out at exactly the right time. So there were a lot of new things that we brought in, from fast food into casual dining, from gourmet restaurants like the Roos restaurant, of the beautiful flavors of food, and using great cheeses like Reggiano, Parmesan cheese, and making chocolate sauce from scratch, from beautiful chocolate from Switzerland, and blending it with sugars and vanilla extracts from Madagascar. All these things we learned to bring into casual dining, because that was sort of the missing link at Steak and Ale. Norman believed in really doing things the easiest way. Like our mushroom sauce at Steak and Ale was Campbell's cream of mushroom from the can. And I said, Norman, we can do a lot better than this.
So I think one of the things which is a real surprise to a lot of people who haven't been entrepreneurs before is that they look at people like Norman Brinker and they say, well, Sam Walton, Norman Brinker, these are just geniuses. How can I possibly be anything like them? And yet, a lot of entrepreneurs, including them, have really been adaptive innovators. In other words, they look around and they say, what things work somewhere else, or what things can I observe that customers want, and then what things do I have to do to make a business replicable so I can scale it? And there's a lot of adapting as well as just having inspiration in the middle of the night.
You know, John, I think you're exactly right. I think when you look at Outback, we are the revival of Steak and Ale, only with bold flavor and committed managers. We just looked at the marketplace and said, there's a niche for the old Steak and Ale to come back alive. And I think there's a lot of people that look at the marketplace and just say, what does the marketplace need? And that's a great place to start. What is lacking in the marketplace? You look at people that started Facebook and all these things. There was something in the market that was needed, and it's such a simple idea. I mean, I look at Facebook as the guy that just wanted to make sure that the girl he was going to meet wasn't in a relationship, and how important that is for a guy to realize that this girl's not already taken. So boom, Facebook, and the question, are you in a relationship? And how important that is in the social media today that was overlooked by so many people, of how do you find out if a girl's in a relationship? Well, boom, Facebook.
Yeah, so it all starts with, if you want to build $1 billion business, you ought to solve $1 billion problem. It may not seem like $1 billion problem. It may be a very personal one,
right.
But it can actually, as you think about it, you can actually think about it sometimes as a really big $1 billion problem. And that's what Facebook did. It said, gosh, suddenly people can have relationships, even if they can't see each other face to face, they can have virtual relationships. And it became a phenomenon, as we all know.
That's right. And I look at Outback, one of the things we solve a big problem was casual diners did not have a place to go and eat a great steak experience and have big, flavorful, bold flavors at modest prices. That we were bringing bold flavors into America casual dining. Because if you look back, American food was bland until the infusion of Cajun food and Cajun spices and regional cooking all took place in the early 80s and moved on through. So American cuisine really had a renaissance in the 80s and 90s. And we just jumped on that bandwagon and rode that wave.